Okay, everybody could join hands in some semblance of a circle.
Whatever you're going to do, Mother. I always knew you were a shopping kind of woman.
Okay, together we... Oh. Try to relax. Can you sit? You don't you want to? Oh. This very weird torque in the body happening. Okay, together we close our eyes and take 6 very slow, deep, relaxing breaths. Letting all of the freeway out on each exhale, all of the workday, all of the thought of yesterday, the thought of tomorrow. We center into right here and now. And this peaceful place is our true home. And into this sacred space we call into a greater experience of the presence of our celestial Father and Mother. And we call upon the angels and the teachers to be here among us. We ask that we be shown and led into a greater understanding of our function and purpose here, and that we be assisted in letting go all that which is unnecessary. And we're very grateful for each other and those who could not make it here tonight, and for the craft and the way. And through our gratitude, together we all say, blessed be.
Blessed be.
Hello. So it's really funny because we were talking and drawn by, people. They just imagine that we're Satanists. And we've talked about that propaganda before and where it came from, and that we think that, it's my theory, and I think it's more than a theory, I think we could probably prove it, that the texts that have come to be known as the Bible were, based on very true teachings, and a lot of those teachings came from older teachings that have been passed down in traditions, and pretty much everything ends up in India or Africa. And if you look back and you look at what those old religions always taught, in whether it's Tibet or China or India or any of the ancient religions, which are all the craft, everything is the craft, that's true, is that there was always this concept of a separate self, and this false self, the self that wasn't real, the self that we perceived ourselves to be that was not true to our nature. And they call it the ego, or they call it the accuser, they call it, because we've all got one in our brain, and you know that. How many of us here have not come into full contact with the accuser? You should have done that right. You should have done that better. Or they should have done that right. They should have done that better. Whatever it is. Always making something wrong with your life or with somebody else's life. And that accuser is a true, valid spiritual concept, that there is part of us that needs to be overcome. Just anytime you try to sit and meditate and you don't want to, that part of you that's resisting the meditation process, is that same energy. So there's a very valid spiritual concept of this false sense of self, that the self that was the brightest star in heaven, and that which is us. We are the brightest star, and we're the only star in heaven, right? We are multitudes of the cosmic thought of perfection. And one day we thought, well, what's the way to be better than God? And the brightest star in heaven said, well, I'm going to be better than God. Well, how do you be better than perfect? How do you be better than true? How do you be better than absolute perfection? You have to be everything that's not God if you're going to create your own universe. And so the brightest star in heaven, this is just another version of that same legend that was told throughout the ages, went back down into the darkness and decided that it was going to start its own universe. Well, what is cancer? It's a cell in your body that says, hey, let's do our own universe. We're going to go create our own universe. The only way that I can be better than the way that this body is healthy, different, is to be against the organism. So the concept of the accuser was a very valid, or Satan, or the ego, or whatever you want to call it, was a very valid concept. But at one point or another, it was decided upon, and I don't think it was like at a board meeting, but I mean, eventually it evolved into, this Christianity thing isn't taken off as well as we want to, and it's really what we need. We really need this church to grow really big. These pagan people, they've got this religion that they just don't want to get rid of. What can we do? I know. Let's call the ego or whatever their God. And then there was fire. Let's call the ego. See, now there's a big resistance to hearing this. We don't want to hear about this.
Someone's getting violent, throwing chairs around.
Why don't we take this concept and superimpose it upon their God, which was the god of fertility, the horned god, right? And then we can give them a valid reason why they're wrong and we're right. We'll scare the bejesus out of them, very literally, and we will have them. And then they will be tithing to us, and we will own their fields or whatever. We all know how it evolved. Eventually, it turned into what it was and what it is to this very day. So I think it's really important to understand where our satanic roots are. Of course we aren't Satanists and we have nothing to do with Satanism, but why is it that people think of us as that? Because there's a tradition. And that's why when the Bible says that the sins of the parents are carried on by the handed down to the children, it's, we learned how to hate the gays by our parents, so therefore we hate the gays. We learned how to hate black people from our parents, therefore we will hate black people. We learned how witches are Satanists from our parents, therefore, and on and on and on. And that's how it goes until we decide one day to choose something new. So I thought it was very interesting that that came up, beforehand, because I think it's very important to not run away from any concept. Now that's the thing that we kind of touched on last month. It's been a month already. That, what our purpose and function of the craft is in the world. Is that according to our legends, we were brought here. The craft was brought here in order to save the world, and that the Magi came to the earth because the world was in savagery and it needed to be saved. Well, it is that way now, and the Magi need to come now, and the Magi need to come through us, because we are, it's our responsibility to get more perfect, so that we can be not the savior of the world, but the vehicle that salvation happens, that we're saved from savagery here, because the hour is very late. If you look in the TV and you look in the newspapers, when we touched upon that. But we also touched upon an idea that I think is very, very interesting, is that a lot of witches, and I think I should write a book on this, because there's more people than just in the DCW that need to hear this, and I don't think it's that big of a deal with us, but I see it a lot in the so-called pagan community, whatever that is, that there is an anti-Christian element that is very interesting. And that is all about a retaliation to what's going on with the Satanist thing, right? We've been called Satanists, and they've been so mean to us, and they burned us at the stake, and therefore, we hate them, and they're the bad guys. We're the good guys, and they're the bad guys, which we know, studying this, When you start thinking in terms of they're the bad guys and we're the good guys, that is a grave error in and of itself, because that is the recipe for war, you know. So, and the tenets say that all nations and all people of all races were created equal with one spiritual source, and that we're all brethren, regardless of our religion. So we know that's not it. But at the same time, the legends say that each age, hey, you. No, I was talking to you. Hi. I didn't get to greet you. I greeted almost everybody else. Hey, there's a lot of people I didn't greet. Hi, y'all. That each age had its teaching that was so significant for that age, for the whole evolution of the species and the planet and the whole concept of our connection between spirit and spirituality and society and everything. And so that coming out of the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius, you know, we're coming from that whole teaching of what Jesus taught. You know, that was the religion of its time. And now here we are, we're saying, oh, well, now we're in the age of Aquarius, so therefore, you know, we can graduate. And, how, you know, it's like saying, I'm going to go ahead and learn calculus before I know how to do addition. You know what I'm saying? Or I'm going to learn how to lift this girl in the pas de deux before I know how to do a plie, if you're in ballet. I'm going to learn how to do a Chopin nocturne before I can play a scale. Right? So we cannot technically get into the age of Aquarius fully, regardless of what the planets are doing in our hearts, until we've completed the lessons of the age of Pisces. Now, it's really simple what Jesus taught. He taught, love your neighbor. It's simple. He taught, forgive your enemies. He taught that death is not real. I mean, the very, very simple things that we all agree with. So it's not the teachings that we have to get in our brain so much, is it's that until we can make peace with the whole concept of what Jesus is and who he is, we can't move on to the next step. And I see it over and over and over again in the pagan community that, well, I can't own my power because I hate Jesus, or I can't own my power. Now, and the reason I'm bringing this up is I was thinking about this the other night. I was doing a meditation a long time ago. I mean, it must have been, I don't know, at least 7 or 8 years ago. And I think it was, I do really bad with chronological time. I always have. It's amazing I ever show up on time for anything. But we've all heard the story of when a guy was leaving the craft. and that's, by the way, when you find your niche in life and you don't do it, expect a lot of stress, okay? When you find something you really are supposed to be doing, when you find your spiritual function in the universe and you decide that you're going to turn your back on it and do something else, expect to be unhappy. Because it's sort of like a fish out of water, right? So anyway, so I was leaving the craft because I thought, you know, it was something other than what it was, and I'd been really burned by a group, and I was going to go off and go to India and do my own thing. And I was meditating, and I got, you know, I started getting really clear. That got my teacher was telling me, well, that's really not the case. And there's other work for you to do, and it's in the craft. And I said, okay, well, fine. So I got okay with that. And then one day, in my meditation, in walks Jesus. And I said, well, what the hell are you doing here? You know what I'm saying? You know, I was, at that point, I was where my teacher was showing up as like a wolf and things like that. You know, it was just something that was a lot easier for me to taste. To understand and to be able to fathom. In walks Jesus, and I'm all, well, what's this all about? And he said, you know, until you forgive me for what you think I did to you, and what you think that my, quote, religion has done to you, you cannot go into the next step with this craft. Yes, ma'am.
I don't think it's so much what Jesus actually did and what his teachings are, but I think it's the Christians out there that are, if they're
No, don't get me wrong. But anyway, I'm talking about me at this point. This was what I was going, I hated him, okay? I hated him because I misunderstood him. I misunderstood because of what Christians were, because we'd been burned at the stake and all this stuff. I mean, I had a whole political propaganda against Christianity, and I was really clear on it, and I was fine with it. And in walks him into my meditation, anyway. And I said, okay, so what am I supposed to do? Just like give up the craft and be a Christian? And he said, please don't. I said, well, so what's this all about? He said, if you would only give the craft to me, I could make such a difference in your life. And I said, this really feels weird,
wasn't a Christian.
Yeah, that's exactly what he said. He goes, that's exactly what he said. He goes, what do you think I was doing? What do you think that was 12 people in my thing? What do you think that was? You think Mary Magdalene was? My prostitute? No, she was the priestess. Get with the program, dear. And I thought, well, this is kind of cool. And he goes, but the thing is that I am your teacher. I always have been, because I was raised a Catholic. Okay? So in my mind, it wasn't so much that it was Jesus or wasn't Jesus. That was totally inconsequential. In my mind, I grew up believing in Jesus so devotedly that turning my back on him, I disowned myself. I disowned my power. So you have a little kid inside of you that never grows up, and that's a good thing. That's where the magic happens. And my little child was really afraid because it didn't understand what was going on, because I was giving it all these symbols that it didn't understand. Well, once I kind of got over it and gave it up, and I noticed that the craft went on, and that I didn't become a Christian, and that I still disagreed with a lot that was going on regarding most of what was going on with the fundamentalist movement, and I was okay with that. Amazing things started opening up for me. And it's the same thing with Jewish people that get into the craft. They think that they're going to be struck down too. And whatever your religion of origin is, I think it's very important that you go back to it and invoke those symbols and make peace with it. Because if you, deep down inside, think you're doing something sinful by being in the craft, even if you've talked yourself out of it, you're not going to be very successful with it. It's going to hurt you in the long run. So I think it's very, and I agree with you. What the people do in the name of any religion, including the craft, thank you very much, is very scary. Now, I think that the symbolism of the witches burning at the stake is a very powerful one for us, because I don't know about any of you, but I feel very connected to that whole thing. For me, I feel like, I don't know, I don't really care to know if it happened in another life. I don't want to relive it. It's not important for me. But I feel like it probably did happen in another life. At least I was around it. I knew what was going on in those times. And that symbol of a witch burning on the stake, being almost like a martyr for the craft, is a very powerful one, because I see what happens with us in this world, especially in the craft, is that we like to burn each other. We like to tie each other up on that stake and light the torch sometimes. Anytime you think of yourself as being judging somebody, anytime you think of yourself as being the judge and jury of another person's actions, you are literally tying them up and lighting the torch. Now, but you know what the sad thing about it is? Do you know the person who you're tying and the person that you're lighting that torch to? You. Exactly. Anytime we try to judge another person or judge ourselves, it's all the same thing. Whatever you do to somebody else, you definitely do to yourself. And that's the whole idea of karma. An idea cannot leave its source. It can't. That's the idea of comeback. It doesn't go anywhere, so it doesn't really come back. It just appears to. If you think poverty and you steal something, you will be stolen from. Why? Because you stole from yourself in the first place. You know what I mean? If you get angry and you smack somebody, you will be abused on some level yourself, because the idea of abuse never left your physical universe, your metaphysical universe, your mind. So, all of that just to say that I didn't mean to go on this diatribe about all this. It happened to be that you mentioned that there is a lot that goes on in magic that's under the surface, and it's not just about change your thoughts. It's not just about visualize the new car. Because, yeah, if you think long enough about the new car, you'll probably get it. But if you think that you're a guilty son of a bitch for doing it through magic, you will definitely sabotage it for yourself. And just because you get that car doesn't mean it will make you happy. Right? So what I think is very important for us, especially in this day and age when there's so much going on in the pagan world, is that we are not out there in the world. We are not out there, hey, we're the pagans, man. You know, that's not the way we were taught. That's not how Eli taught it. You know, we are literally the white blood cells of the universe. We are under the surface. We go out there. They do not need to know. When, you do not need to say, when you're asked to do something at work, and you're not sure if you want to take the new promotion or something, let me talk to my mental teacher and I'll get back with you tomorrow. That's probably not the best idea, but you can think that. You can think that. Let me go meditate on that. Let me talk to you tomorrow is okay. But then you do. You go and you ask your teacher, what's up for me? And we started getting into, that's what I wanted to talk a little bit about tonight, was the mental teacher. Is that because the mental teacher for me showed up as Jesus, it freaked me out, and then I kind of got that it will use whatever it needs to at any given moment in order. It's not picky, and it doesn't care what you call it either. It doesn't care if you call it the Great Spirit. It doesn't care if you call it Dolly Madison. It doesn't care what you call it, as long as you understand that it's there for you and that you can't teach yourself. Because if you could teach yourself, wouldn't you already be perfect? Right? So the teacher is your mental source of knowledge. And if you don't use the teacher, then you don't have a dialogue developing and you can't progress. Why do you think we say that if you do these particular practices, you will speed up your perfection? Now, if you are wanting to, what's something that anybody would want to get great at? Any kind of art or craft or anything? Playing the piano. Okay. You could get a book. You could even get a really good computer program, and you could learn some really good mechanical skills. And you could do quite well for yourself. However, if Van Cliburn showed up and said, I got an hour, why don't you play me what you've got and let me tell you what you want to do? You wouldn't say, no, thank you, I'll do it on my own. I'm going to go back to my software. Thank you very much for asking. You wouldn't do that, would you? Because it's not so much that Van Cliburn's going to tell you something. Your mental teacher is the presence of somebody that's ahead of you that can just in their presence, they don't have to tell you words, although sometimes it's very clear for me. It's like, and it's always never usually at a very important moment in my life what I really wanted to hear, Ultimately, it's what I wanted to hear. Like, no, no, I don't think that's a good idea. And it's always very persistent, but very soft for me. So it's like, no, I really, really don't think you should do that, over and over again. But it's really, whether or not there's a voice, it's just relaxing in the presence of the master. Now, in the 20th, almost 21st century, everything we think quick is the internet. We think that's quick. You can get on and you have access to whatever you want. We think quick is, it depends on if you have AOL or not, right? But we are plugged into so much more than we ever were information-wise, and we expect things in 5 minutes. We expect the yeast to rise quicker than it wants to. We expect the plants to grow, and if they don't grow the way we want them, we'll just shoot them with some hormones, and then they'll grow. So in this day and age, quick is definitely the ticket. But there's a difference between speeding up your process and rushing it. There really is a big difference, because what we've learned, and anybody that's been at this at all, that has any experience relaxing in the presence of the mental teacher, knows that you don't get speeding, you do not speed up your process until you learn how to slow down. It's a total dichotomy. In order to speed up in the next world, in the mental world, you've got to slow down your activity in this world. Now, I don't know about you, but I know that I have more than one phase of mind. And we can, in our writings, there's definitely a map. Eli talks about a map of the mind, where there's like this map, there's a diagram of how the mind is set up. And there is, I've corresponded it very easily to the 3 levels of vibration that are talked about in our tenets, the telestial, the terrestrial, and the celestial. There is definitely a celestial vibration of mind. That's when I'm connected with my teacher. There's definitely a terrestrial vibration of mind when I'm kind of being a good guy, And then there's definitely a telestial vibration of my mind. And it's usually on the 405 freeway about 6:30 in the evening. That is most savage. It is most fight or flight for me. Okay? Now, for me, and I don't know what it's like for anybody in this room, when I make a decision, an important decision, it's very important that I don't try to make it by myself. I really need to, and ultimately, it's your higher self that you're talking to, and we all know that, hopefully, intellectually. It is ultimately your higher self that is your teacher. I think ultimately there's only one mind anyway, but that's another, we don't need to get into that. But when I sit, or sometimes lie, sometimes sitting is even too much stress for me. If I've really had a stressful day, it's in the bathtub even. But when I can just relax and do the relaxation, and I connect with that mental teacher, the decision that I make in that moment is definitely much different energetically than the decision that I would have been making 20 minutes prior to that, right? Now, the trick is that eventually, I don't know how often everybody here meditates, I've got to do it twice a day. Just to stay sane without necessarily worrying about progression, just to stay here, stay at this level, just because there's so much stress out there in the world. I've got to meditate at least twice a day, once in the morning and once at night. And usually I have several trips to the bathroom during the day, okay, because I'm a pretty high-strung person. Oh yeah. Oh, like we've said, the men's room at my company is very sacred space now, and it'll never be the same in there because of all of the relaxation that I've done. But when pretty soon you get to be where it is more and more, I think, on autopilot, where I don't necessarily have to go into a full-on trance before the voice is like right there, and it's right there, right in front of me. Now, remember when your grandma used to teach you about your conscience? I don't know, but or somebody, let your conscience be your guide.
That's Jimmy.
Yeah, right? But sometimes that's, I think, what the mental teacher is. The little angel on the one shoulder and the little devil on the other shoulder. I definitely can relate to those two parts of my mind. The mental teacher, I know that it's the mental teacher when it's usually a soft yet persistent voice. I usually know it's me, by myself, when it's a very loud, raging voice that's either going to annihilate somebody or get some sort of instant gratification. Quickly. You know, when it seems like the right thing to do, it's probably not my voice. In an instant where I would have to question. I mean, if you don't have to question, then why bother? But, you know, like when you find the money on the, when you know that lady just dropped that $20 bill. Well, you know, I could see it as a gift from the universe, you know. The soft yet persistent voice is, you know, this is a good opportunity for you to connect with, you know. It's like, shut the fuck up. I want the money. I need the $20, you know. But that so you can all relate to the difference there. I remember when somebody had put a bag of groceries really recently in my car. I mean, in my shopping basket that I hadn't paid for. And it wasn't so much that I wanted to keep the groceries. I didn't discover it till I had been all the way out to my car, and I was so tired. I didn't even want to be at the store at that time of night, let alone have to deal with the fact that I've got these groceries here that don't belong to me. So, but of course, the voice in me was very persistent. You need to go take those back to those people, because what's going to happen is they're going to get home with their groceries, and they're not going to have the peanut butter and jelly for their kids, for their sandwiches tomorrow, because that's what it was. It was food I didn't really eat. And the orange juice, so orange juice, peanut butter, and jelly. I'm like, you know, these kids are going to want this tomorrow, and perhaps they can't even afford to lose that kind of money. Blah 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 blah. So okay. Took the bag, and I tell you, I have never seen so many shocked faces in my life that somebody would have actually brought a bag of groceries in. And I thought, I live in Irvine, I thought everybody's probably honest. You know what I'm saying? And I didn't even do it because I thought I was being so holy. I did it because I knew it was the right thing to do, and that I'd catch hell for it later if I wasn't going to do that. You know what I mean? So I think that when we get into our meditation, sometimes people expect, because I talk about my mystical experiences with my teacher to people, and I think sometimes they judge me. I mean, not judge me, but judge their experiences based on what they hear, and they think, oh, I'm not having this thing like he does, so I must not be doing it right. It's much more subtle sometimes than you want to believe. But until we can turn off the chatter in our minds, we cannot hear that still small voice within us. Remember the line from the Psalm. Well, it's repeated several times in the Bible. Be still and know that I am God. Now, when we are wanting mystical experiences or spiritual unfoldment, sometimes I think we're looking for fireworks, which is okay. I mean, it's okay when they come, because sometimes, I mean, expect them, because they do happen. But the biggest revelations or whatever, the biggest growths that I've no, don't say growth. The biggest times of growth in my life, and of good growth in my spirit, have been, progression, thank you, in my life have been not these major moments, but the accumulation of my day-to-day spiritual habit. When you play your scales every day on the piano or on your guitar or whatever, over and over again, it becomes a habit. You become really good at it. When you, whatever you do, when you, I don't know if any of you have ever seen that book, The Artist's Way. You know, whether you like it or not, you get up every day and you write 3 pages of whatever. Just write it. Just write over and over, so that you're always in the habit of having a creative flow with your writing. It's the same thing with working with your teacher. It's not that your teacher is having a bad day when you aren't getting it. It's because you aren't able to receive because of wherever your black transmitter is. And that usually has to do with the tension that you're holding in your body. But where does the tension in your body start from? Tension in your mind. What's a tense thought? Give me an example of a tense thought.
Gonna be late.
I'm gonna be late. Yeah, you bloody bastard. Now let's take those. Let's start with you're going to be late. If you're going to be late, what can you do about it? Nothing. Yeah. Nothing. There's nothing you can do about it, right? If you know you're late, and that's just how it is, okay, I've got a great example for this. Now, there's a difference between thinking you're relaxed and being relaxed. Okay, there's a huge difference. Sometimes being relaxed involves getting rid of tension. I was at we talked about this earlier tonight too. It's funny how things come full circle. I was at Irvine Spectrum. We were entertaining out-of-town guests. An out-of-town guest. Very important person for us professionally. I said, the parking is usually brilliant. I don't know where he got the brilliant idea. Let's go to the Cheesecake Factory on a Saturday night. At the new wing of the Irvine Spectrum, right? I said, okay, well, why don't I leave you guys off at the front? You guys go put our name in. That way we'll have a little, time while I'm parking the car, because it'll take a little while for me to find a parking place. And you guys can, get started with our name on the list. Okay. 45 minutes later, I'm still weaving in and out. Everybody was getting the place. Everybody was getting to the parking place before me, and I kept doing an affirmation. The perfect parking place is opening up for me right now. The perfect parking place is opening up for me. I visualize the parking place just opening. I am so relaxed and so in tune with the universe and blah, 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 blah. And it was just again and again and again. They kept getting it and they kept getting it and they kept getting it. I was right in the wrong place at the right time. I am now in the right place at the right time for the perfect parking place to come in. I had the window open. I said my favorite swear word 4 times in a row, very loud. I heard somebody across the parking place crack up. That moment, the person in front of me pulled out, and I got my parking place right at that moment. So really, you delay the inevitable when you pretend that you're relaxed. I know we say fake it till you make it, but sometimes you just need to scream into a pillow. Really. It's so much easier to just move the energy off. Now, I'm not saying that it's a good idea to indulge in anger, especially in other people's presence. But when you're by yourself, sometimes it's a good thing to just say, just to let it out. And then, especially if it can crack you up. And I've told the story before about the time when I was in traffic. And there was just the worst congestion, and I was going to be late. I think I was coming to a round table, and I was just so late. And I think there was an accident. I don't know what had happened. And I was so mad. And again, I just blew it, and the window was open. And the lady across from me said, "Oh, just calm down," or something like that. And it cracked me up so much that I started laughing, and lo and behold, the congestion just broke up. The congestion on the freeway just broke up. So I really think that whatever the congestion in our life is a direct reflection of the congestion in our mind, and that mental congestion always has a physical counterpart, but you cannot be connected to your higher good when you are all glugged up inside. And sometimes you need to move the energy, but it's really all about a habit. Training your mental habits. Now, when you meditate every night with your mental teacher, sometimes what that's all about is there will be no voice. There will be no instruction. It will all be about, please observe, please observe, please observe, please observe. That's what your meditation might be all about that time. Just looking at nothing. Just like, this is a typical meditation sometimes for me. I'm totally relaxed. And then I got to do. And then my mother, is just off. And if I get all caught into the train of thought, then I can follow it. And then the mental teacher says, just observe it. Come back here. And that's what the mental teacher will be all about for that meditation, or for that series of meditations for me will be a gentle reminder. Come back here and now. That's very interesting. Thank you very much. There's always some part of my mind then that starts saying, you really should be, and then the mental teacher will say, well, thank you for sharing. Next thing, whatever it is. And I found that habit of being able to be observing is very interesting, because I have nothing to do, my real self that observes all that stuff has nothing to do with the me that thinks it's thinking all that stuff. You know what I mean? It's just like, if I can observe it, how can I be it? And it is very interesting to notice that, just to notice that I have a real sick thought pattern there, and I'm really glad that has nothing to do with me, because it just kind of goes around and around and around and around, and this, I hate this person, and I'm mad at this person, and I'll never make it because of this. But then there's a part of me that just is looking at that, and it's very interesting. And that part of me that's very interesting is very connected to my mental teacher, keeping me centered on the moment, looking at what's happening. And you know what? There's a part of me that doesn't like that. And that part of me always wants to fidget. Always. Can anybody relate? Always wants to get up and go do something. That's why I set a clock. At least at first, when I was first getting into this, I don't anymore. I would. Because I could never do 20 whole minutes. I would always say, this has got to have been at least an hour, and it had been 4 minutes. You know what I mean? And I'm relaxed. But what I started doing is to keep my mind off of that, and to know that I was doing my full 20 minutes that I was committed to doing. I'd set a little hourglass, or a little, have a clock there, or set the alarm. And people think, how could you set the alarm? Won't that jar you out of your meditation? I'm like, yeah, but then at least I can relax for the 20 minutes knowing that I don't have to watch the clock because it'll wake me up later. You know what I'm saying? Which is also a good thing to do if you happen to be one of those people that always meditate at the end of the day when you're tired. Because knowing that you're going to have the alarm go off in 20 minutes, you're not going to get all that into your sleep pattern, but you might relax deeply. So it's another trick you can use. But whatever, I commit myself to doing the full 20 minutes, even if it's uncomfortable, because the discomfort is all about, for me, and I think for everybody that experiences that, is that there's a part of you that knows that it's dying. You die a little bit. The part of you that isn't you dies a little bit because it's being observed by the real you. Does that make sense? So, but what the point of all this is, then in the real world, when you're having a moment, there's a part of you that notices it. And I find that is just such a miracle. There is probably no time in my life when I have a moment anymore where I get lost in the moment, where I don't just kind of look back and think it's very funny that I'm going through this right now, and that I'm reacting in that particular way. Now that's true progression. I don't care what anybody says. Now, if I couldn't have done that on my own, that is my mental teacher. We've talked about this before. The best I can do is being not unkind. That's my best. You know what I mean? I can fake really well being nice, and because I know it's the good thing to do. But the real me, or the teacher, is pure love. And when I can connect to that pure love, and I can connect to it in a sense that's greater than what I think I'm all about, it's like studying in the presence of the master. Like Mozart came and gave me a piano lesson. That's what that's all about.